Hello and welcome back to Kvikmyndapod, an Icelandic cinema podcast. I'm Rob Watts, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Ellie Cawthorne for another journey through the cinema of Iceland. This week, we leave the uncomfortable environs of 21st century Vesturbæjar for the incredibly harsh and remote terrain of 1940s Strandir in A Letter from Helga, or Svar við bréfi Helgu, directed by Helga Hjörleifsdóttir. We haven't seen this period in Icelandic history before, so for that reason alone, this film is fascinating. It's an adaptation of a well-loved novel and was available to watch with English subtitles on the RÚV website, just like last week's film Wild Game. If it's not there right now, keep checking via the link I've popped in the show notes, as I'm sure it'll return soon. One of Iceland's biggest current acting exports, Hera Hilmar, known for the Jason Momoa TV series C, reunites with fellow Life in a Fishbowl actor Thorvaldur Kristjansson for this beautiful historical romance. And you know who's a history buff? Ellie. So listen on for our somewhat insightful discussion.
Frá því leiðir okkar skildu hef ég skrifað þér mörg bréf, en jafnóðum eitt þeim öllum. Þau voru full af reiði og beiskju. Gat ekki hugsað heila hugsun hvað það skrifað. Ég þurfti að brjóta mér leið út, sem mér tókst það kvöld sem ég sendi þig heim. Svo lífið geti haldið áfram.
Hi Ellie.
Hi Rob.
How's it going?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very well. It's cold out.
Ooh, and a bit cold in.
That's very true, actually. We're all wrapped up. The cold beers that we're drinking probably not helping greatly for that. But the film we're watching today didn't sort of make me feel colder, which was good. It was kind of one of those films that was perfect for kind of curling up on the sofa and just luxuriating in its kind of
It's almost
romance.
like a oil painting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's both visually and literally, it's quite poetic and artsy, and I guess that's reflective of one of its main characters as well. But yeah, shall we just get on with it?
Let's
not
on.
dilly-dally. Let's just start talking about it. So this week we're talking about the film A Letter from Helga. In Icelandic, that's Svar við bréfi Helgu, from 2022. And I'm just going to kick it off with the shortest synopsis I could think of to write, because we can talk through the story as we go. It's not a particularly heavy, massive story.
No, I think you'll be able to sum it up quite succinctly.
Okay,
Go.
Tell me what you think then. In a remote village, said that so many times. In a remote village in the Westfjords of Iceland in the 1940s, married sheep farmer Bjarni begins an affair with a neighbouring married sheep farmer, Helga. As their passion and love grow, the couple struggle to make a unanimous decision on their future. And that's all I've written, but I guess it's key to say this film is kind of bookended, or even like just all the way through, it's sort of...
It's bookended with the classic device of an old man looking back.
Yes. And then voiceover of this letter of the title that he is reading. So we basically see events from the past taking place, but we see one of the main characters in the future perhaps regretting his life choices.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it. And this is a film based on, it's a sweeping romance, I would say.
Is it that sweeping though?
Well, the camera work is...
The camera work is sweeping. The setting and it is quite small and kind of claustrophobic, and I guess that's about the point.
Yes, completely. Imagine, it's just crazy to be that claustrophobic in a country or even in surroundings that are so vast, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. It is kind of a small story, but it's set in this like huge...
landscape.
Yeah, and the landscape really comes into play, doesn't it? And it's based on a really popular novel, really short novel from 2010 by Bergsveinn Birgisson, which is like, yeah, it's really, really popular. And that's called A Reply to a Letter from Helga. So it's written as Bjarni, our main character, writing a response to the letter that we see him receive in this film.
But in the film, Helga never gets a response then.
I guess not. No. I haven't read it, obviously. Perhaps she never does get this reply.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that it is adapted from a book. Like a lot of the films that we've talked about actually on this podcast, it does have that sentiment. And I imagine a lot of it's about interiority and emotion and emotional experience, and without things being kind of overly expressed, basically feelings kept within. And sometimes I do think it's a bit hard to translate that from a book to the screen, but maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, we can start with that, I suppose. It's like it's difficult when you're reading a book and someone's spilling their guts to then just see them acting that out, because if they haven't done something, how do you portray them not doing that thing? And
they stare really intensely.
Yes, or they scream, or it's a tricky one.
And I think maybe that was slightly why I did enjoy this film, but why I was maybe not as drawn in as I have been by some things, because a lot of this film is about kind of moments of stillness and quietness and self-reflection, but sometimes that leaves you a tiny bit lacking in kind of getting a sense of people's personalities and I maybe would have preferred a bit more of a richer characterization, which I think for me would have come from more dialogue.
Okay, interesting. Well, talking about characterization, we've got four main characters, the two headliners, and then their respective partners. So we've got Bjarni, who is married to Unnur and lives on the one farm. And he's like aspirational man. Look at him with his farm, his beautiful wife. He's really good at wrestling. He's
which
always
comes up in these films.
There's always wrestling, and they do call it glima in this one. They actually say the word, which is, I think, what we've seen in every other time we've seen the wrestling. So there's Bjarni, and then on the neighbouring farm, which still requires a tractor to get to, is Helga and her husband Hallgrimur, and their relationship seems from the off a bit more
troubled.
That's a good word. Like, they talk about having been together for 7 years or whatever it is, but Helga doesn't look particularly happy with that.
Or particularly old enough for that.
Good point, yeah.
I was like, how old is she? I guess maybe if she's meant to be 26, 27.
Yeah, I mean, 40s Iceland.
Probably
how old? They probably met when they were 16.
17.
Yeah. So that's not that surprising. And also, if they did get married young, it would make sense that actually
now they've fallen out.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. I guess a lot of what this film is about is this kind of weird tension between isolation and loneliness in this community, in which I think both the main characters are feeling lonely. And obviously, like you say, they're on these remote farms, but they're basically there with one other person. And so if that relationship works, it's like incredibly fulfilling, as with the old guy whose wife dies. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, you're left basically alone. So there's that loneliness on the one hand, but then it's also such a small community that it's kind of like too close-knit, and it's all about people, rumors and people gossiping, and how in those small communities you can't really have your own thing going on.
Yeah. And it almost comes across as Helga not having really thought about there being another person, because there's so few people around. Why would anyone else be?
The pickings would be slim.
Yeah, which is why it's so funny that the whole thing kicks off with a rumor. That's mad that this guy just comes up with this rumor because he sees them walking in the same direction from the same place.
I quite like a couple of elements of that though. Like one, that they already knew each other at the start of this film.
Yes.
So it's not like they've just met, somebody's moved in, and it's, as is so often the case with like romance plots. But also that kind of, this all being kicked off by a rumour, that idea of like planting a seed. It's like a classic kind of, in Shakespeare, it's a thing, isn't it? In Much Ado About Nothing with Beatrice and Benedict, where basically everyone tells the other one that the other one loves them.
Yeah.
And then that therefore kind of makes them go, oh, wait, I've never seen them in that light before. And a whole new kind of vista opens up.
Yes, I mean, in that film, it's so funny because they actually despise each other in a comic way for so long. But yeah, really, the feelings underneath, they're there, aren't they? Well, and I suppose in this film, they're both looking for an outlet because Bjarni's wife, Una, she can't be intimate. She can't bring herself to be intimate after what I presume is a miscarriage, with Bjarni away doing, I think they say it's lambing season, don't they? And that nothing can get in the way of that if you're Bjarni, supposedly. And for Helga, it's a dissatisfaction with her just entire marriage. And they're not necessarily looking for love, but they're given this reason to sort of think about it. And it's like when Una confronts Bjarni, she's like, of course this was going to happen. We can't be intimate. You'll be looking for an outlet or whatever. That he hasn't considered. But now he's like, well, if everyone thinks it's happening,
may as well be happening.
Might as well happen. And whether that leads to love or just a sexual relationship, if people are assuming these things, then why not? Other than for him, the guilt of.
Yeah. I did think that the two main characters did have quite a good chemistry. And you could see there was enough kind of seeds sown of why they would get on. They were both kind of more intellectual than their partners.
Yeah,
and
they're
both
in the book club.
Kind of deep thinkers or sensitive and thinking about poetry and stuff. But I do wish we'd had maybe a bit more of their kind of just little falling in love moments. Yes.
So that's an interesting point because they really get together and it is just like purely sexual. But then we never really see them actually developing the love that we are to believe is there.
I guess like the only scenes we see of the affair once it begins is them kind of like making passionate love in a shed.
In the hay.
And, like staring into each other's eyes. We don't really see much of them like laughing and hanging out, but maybe they weren't.
Well, no, I guess they couldn't really. I mean, how long can he spend away from from his farm without? Because he's such a man of the farm. He's such a farmer, and one of his key traits is that he can't tear himself away from the life that his 9 generations of family have had, which is to work the land, live in the farm, and get on with it. Like, so, how much time in his mind is he allowed to give to her? Like, he wants the sex, and maybe for him the love comes sort of secondary. I don't know.
But I don't know about that because the whole framing of this, right, is that it's like this great love that he could never get back.
Yeah.
And he's looking back on it from like 40 years later. He's not being like, oh yeah, that was a great bit of sex. He's like, that was the love of my life.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is very sort of not confusing, but
I wonder if it's a slightly inevitable result of when you have to compress something into an hour and 47 minutes, isn't it? That you kind of need the time spent on the drama and the terrible things that are unleashed, and you don't have enough time to kind of fill out the affair of them just having a nice time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's very confused, isn't he? And I don't know if he ever really decides which he loves more, the thought of the history of his family or the thought of being with, in inverted commas, the love of his life. And that's kind of the key tension in the whole film. not just Bjarni and Helga, but Bjarni and what he wants to do. And it's quite, for me, it's quite frustrating because I'm like, you know, if you love each other, what's stopping you? And Helga can't see that. And Helga's like, I'm gonna move. You should come with me. And he just can't.
To me, she emerges from the film as a much more likable character than him.
Yeah.
She's braver.
Yeah.
And also, if you think about it, she makes this point herself that she's the one that has to be, you know, like ostracized from the community because she has given birth to somebody else's child.
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead now. Whereas he can carry on living his life there, and that's fine. But she, I think, is more proactive, and he is just, he's not brave enough, he's cowardly.
But what would happen if he'd we've jumped right ahead. But if he was to leave at the moment that she leaves for Reykjavik, what happens then to his farm, to his livelihood? Could he have left that to Unna?
Maybe. Could he have sold it and given her some of the money?
Mm-hmm.
And they could have both started new lives. I guess the thing is that's important maybe as well as the context, isn't it? Of like that it's in 1940s. So of course the idea of just getting a divorce was carried a lot more weight than it does now. Yeah,
but is the stigma of a divorce any more of a stigma than being adulterous?
Knocking up your neighbour's wife.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hvað kom fyrir ykkur? Ég held ég hef hægt að elska Hallgrím fyrir löngu síðan. Ég held að lífið yrði ævintýri með honum. Svo var hann alltaf bara fastur í sínu eigin ævintýri. Þú þarft ekki að vorkenna mér. Þið Unnur, þið virtust vera jafningjar. Fullkomið par. Fullkomin bær. Fullkomin ásýnd.
Það kannski bara það sem það Fullkomin ásýnd.
Let's jump back to the beginning of their kind of friendship. I loved how everything about their relationship was sort of told to us through the book club. Everything that they read somehow
very
just
convenient
reflected exactly what was happening. The book club moments were quite fun, I thought, for the most part. Like, so they're reading Knut Hamsun, who's this Norwegian writer who was very big, won the Nobel Prize. I think he was mid-19th to mid-20th century. And just everything they say is like, oh, this could apply to us.
Yeah. It was a classic kind of tell the audience what they need to know about the scene without spelling it out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, arguably they did
just spelling it out. Yeah, like the one book club moment where he's like, oh, well, he says she's a coward and Helga thinks that she's like really, she's gutsy and taking the jump. She's going to have this relationship. And he's like, oh, well, I don't agree. And you're just like, well, yeah, we get it. That's how you feel about your own relationship. But also, those moments just to me were like, well, if that's how he feels, where's this going? I feel like it's not going to play out that well.
Yeah. I mean, this affair is very short-lived before it becomes doomed, isn't it?
Well, it feels that way, doesn't it? It's hard to tell how much time has passed, particularly. But the way it starts is just brilliant, though. It's like classic Icelandic rural life.
Yeah.
They're dipping some sheep. I described this sheep dip, which they say is like full of piss and ash and plants and stuff, as like a love potion. It's like the moment they make this concoction,
the game's afoot.
That's when it begins, and the whole thing begins. Not that he lasts particularly long initially, but that release and that relationship starts there in the sheep shed. I loved it.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times have we seen sheep shed sex? I feel like we have seen it, but
I don't know.
I couldn't pinpoint
it's
a
very
moment.
Mills and Boone, wasn't it? In the hay.
That's so true. The hay with the sunlight coming through the
exactly.
window. And it weirdly kind of reflects that stuff. But I also found it not melodramatic enough. I don't feel like I was emotionally invested enough in either of them.
Really?
I could have probably done with a bit more kind of out and out drama.
Yes.
Or even the music to just be like swelling and like telling me you should be supporting one or the other. And I felt a bit more like I'm just watching something play out and I'm not that invested. I actually would have preferred it to be a bit more soapy almost.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think maybe that leads back to the thing I was saying earlier about a lot of it because it's based on a book being about stuff happening inside rather than being outwardly expressed. But there were points where, it did get quite melodramatic. So when Helga left and Bjarni basically loses it and...
Oh, well, yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
When he sees her like packing up the bags and then he sort of
has a big fight with his wife. Just the same bit.
Well, there's the moment where Helga tells him she's pregnant and he runs away on the horse. And then he's on the edge of the cliff going, ah!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty
and then later, when he has a big anger, takes it out on a sheep. This is when I turned against him.
Oh, not Bjassi. Oh, my God. But, so, that's such a good moment. So, he's taking his anger out on the sheep, fine. Is it just that, or is he jealous of the sheep?
Jealous of the sheep?
Well, Bjassi's his ram, his prize ram, the one who's impregnating all the sheep.
I
don't know. He's like jealous of how free he is.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
I don't know.
That's quite compelling argument. I hadn't thought of it that way. I just thought of it as a straight, he's angry and he needs to express that anger somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's 100% is that. I was just wondering, like, is there any more significance to it? But also, I'm just having this thought now. If he's killed his ram, what's left for the farm? If he wants to keep it in the family, how does that work if he's now got to go off and find another random ram to replace him with? Like, he's almost done himself a favour there in that, well, there's no more rams, so I might as well leave.
I have to say, what your point was about rooting for anybody, I at first was like, yeah, go for it, find some love. And then as things progressed, I turned against Bjarni because I felt he did increasingly bad things. Helga, I'm still on the side of. But yeah, my sympathy was ground down for him. So then maybe I wasn't as invested.
So what specifically did he do?
So, well...
Is it the stringing along his wife thing?
So many things, right?
Yeah.
So many things. So first of all, stringing along both his wife and Helga.
Yeah.
Wanting to have his cake and eat it. Mm-hmm. Saying, oh, maybe I'll stay with my wife and then I'll come see you.
Oh, we'll get... Yeah, let's come to that moment towards the end.
I mean, then being incredibly horrible to his wife later on. When he basically throws her against the wall and says, I wish you were dead. I imagine you choking on your food.
What? Yeah.
Like, how do you come back from that?
Poor Una.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When he's the one that's had an affair. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's their relationship initially, you're like, she understands why he might need an outlet. But there's absolutely no need for any of that violence or aggression.
Exactly. Then he murders a sheep.
Yeah.
That sheep wasn't involved.
No, not his fault.
And doesn't even eat the sheep, just throws it in the sea.
Yeah. And then does he try to kill himself there?
I think that's the plan, yeah.
Yeah.
So he jumps in the freezing sea, like I'll let the sea take me kind of thing, and then changes his mind.
Shocker. Bjarni changes his mind or can't decide.
And so then, like, because, what's Helga meant to do is wait around for him to decide. Like, she gives him, like, a clear, like, do you want to come with me? And he's like, oh, I don't know. So, she made the best decision. Get rid of him in the bin.
Yeah, that totally agree. But let's have a quick focus on Unnur. We haven't said who anyone's played by, actually. So Bjarni's played by Thorvaldur Kristjansson. Helga is played by Hera Hilmar, both of whom we saw in Life in a Fishbowl. And Unnur is played by Anita Briem, who we saw in Quake and last week in Willebrouth, Wild Game. And she was great. Like, what a performance as Unnur, who is just this...
It's just like on the brink the whole time. Like somebody who's just like on the tiptoeing on the edge of a nervous breakdown, isn't she?
Her entire situation is so sad. Is the only real word for it. She has a loving husband up to a point, and then, you know, just when they think that their family is like complete, tragedy befalls her or them, and that kind of, then the distance comes in, but she's trying to carry on as normal while understanding Bjarni's thoughts and actions. And even when he's like deep in the affair, she's still cooking him meals and almost cutting his beard and just like going about things, hosting the book club as well. Like that's awkward as fuck when Hallgrimur comes in and she's just like, I think it's time for coffee now. And like, oh God. And no one ever confronts her about any of it. They just let her exist. And she's like, I've been in two minds about how I feel about what she decides. Like, is the best thing to just carry on,
bear it,
or should she have? I don't know.
It's like in this situation where marriage for some people is like a life sentence, where they're just trapped in it and they can't get out. And I guess if you're her in the 40s, you're not going to be able to make much money as a woman on your own. Like you could work, but you're not going to get well paid. So it's almost like you could have a life of penury and being alone and being ostracized as a divorcee, or you could just suck it up and try and make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, it's like keeping up appearances kind of thing. As long as she looks like she's still in a marriage, then it can't be all bad and people won't be so, I don't know, negative or...
It's so bleak though.
It is really bleak. And she, like, because she carries on and eventually we hear that she's like selling her needlework around the country, which is great. She's actually got this focus and it's sort of helped her to some degree. But that tapestry she sews, it's just like, oh my God, why would you want to hang that on your wall?
Is it inherently dark and creepy, or is it just the way it's shot?
What? The moment that she's knitting it, or sewing it, rather?
I mean, when it's hanging on the wall.
When it's hanging on the wall. Well, obviously, yeah, it's pretty creepy the way they frame it. But why would you literally... why would you put a picture of your situation that's so dire?
Do you think it was that I don't think she intended that, though? I'm just like,
really?
we're interpreting that when we look at it.
I don't know, because she does do it after the affair starts. Okay. One of them is blonde, one of them is brunette, and then there's a man in the middle. Oh, come on, it can't be any more explicit. This film is quite explicit with what it's like.
I absolutely love that as a passive-aggressive move, though. I just made us a lovely new tapestry for the wall. It's me, you, and your mistress.
Yeah, okay. I just don't even know if Bjarni like really registered it at the start. Exactly. But he does try to kind of cover it up from his daughter at the end, doesn't he? He's like, she probably got it out of a magazine or something.
Yeah, like, as if.
No, that is the reason you exist is because of that that threesome just there. Unna just, it's just a really sad performance, like brilliantly done. She's just trying to cling on to some sort of life.
It's almost horrible to watch. She's so like brittle and fragile and like pale and thin and
Yeah, and she's not
sad.
eating as well.
Ooh.
It's like, is she not eating? Was she always not eating? Or was she not eating post-affair?
I think she's like in a grief, isn't she?
Just constant grief since the loss of the child. So, obviously Bjarni, he's moved away from his wife because of the sex thing. But Helga, on the other hand, is like free to do what she wants almost.
Yeah.
Like Hallgrim's got no idea because he's away, sleeping around.
Yeah, you feel less sorry for him, don't you?
Also not that bothered. I feel like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a bit of a dick. Why are you sleeping around?
Mm.
But also, he's not abusive. He's not, I mean, he's a bit of a drunk, but we never see anything particularly
terrible,
egregious
Yeah.
in their relationship, just that they don't really love each other.
Yeah.
So Hallgrimr, played by Bjorn Thors, who's, pretty famous actor in Iceland as well. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He does a good job of kind of just being this guy who flits in and out and doesn't get to be with his wife and doesn't really seem to care that much. Like, she accuses him of cheating and he can't deny it.
He's like,
he just like laughs.
I'll just roll over here. Ha ha.
Yeah. And then he's off the next day again. So the two relationships are quite different. And Helga just makes the most of what she's got. Like you say, she doesn't want to be this maligned woman who just the scourge of the village. But she does say to Hallgrimr, like, you've got a child. So she's made that definitive decision to say, like, this is your child. Forget Bjarni.
Mm-hmm.
But then she still moves away. So it's hard to know whether she's like, we are done.
Towards the end, the kind of sequence of events gets a bit muddled for me. After she's like has the baby, because then it feels like the baby's been brought up by somebody else, and then suddenly she's moving away, and then does Bjarni get involved or does he not? Like, it's when the daughter comes to see him, I was a bit confused about the backstory to that relationship. Yeah,
it was confusing because it felt like she knew him well.
Yeah.
But then she calls Hallgrimr dad.
Did she call? Yeah.
She does, because she says, or at least in the subtitles that we saw, she says dad and Raquel or whoever, like his new partner, or his, I assume it was his new partner. She calls him dad. But then, so why is Hulda's relationship with Bjarni seem so special? Like that she's comfortable enough to come and get drunk in his house. She's hugging him. She obviously gives him the letter from her mum. It is a bit tricky to unpick.
Yes.
Exactly what has happened over that kind of
span of time.
14, 15 years.
Yeah, because it gave the sense that when he goes to see her, she's like, don't come back here. I've got nothing to do with you. So that was, slightly perhaps not plotted out that well.
Yeah. Well, should we talk about that moment that he does go to Reykjavik then? So before she leaves, she's like, you can be whoever you want to be. Like, come to Reykjavik. And he's like, I don't want to work for the Americans. I've got this whole life thing, whatever. Fair point.
So my question is, fine, he doesn't want to live in the city. He's a farmer.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he sell his farm and then they can move to Canada, like in the dream?
Oh.
Become a farmer there.
Well, yeah.
I guess he's still got the attachment that this is the land that his family have worked for how many generations.
I mean, I think that is it. It's just the pull. And he even talks about it in one of those other book clubs where he's talking about the motherland. Oh no, it's not in the book club, is it? It's in the poem that he recites back to Helga, and she's like, "Stop reciting shitty poetry," even as she's the most poetic person around. But yeah, he's like, clings to this idea that even like this remote part. So I think I should say, like, where they are is so remote. It's in the east coast of the Westfjords in a place called Strandir, which is even now
stranded.
Basically, yeah, like it's not that accessible. It's not a busy place. They are literally on the edge of the world, essentially. Like they can't even go and visit Gisli and his deceased wife because the sea is like too choppy, or it's covering some land or whatever. But yet he clings to that. Like all he's ever known is this one patch of land. Like I'm sure there's an element of just being terrified of leaving that place. And I guess there's that whole bit with the war going on in the background. And they're like, I was like, why are you introducing the war into this? Okay, it is going on because it's the 40s, but maybe there's this whole thing of like they are all to some degree scared of the outside world. Like the war is scary, but what else is out there? If all they've come into contact with is guns and bombs and dead soldiers or navy washing up on the shores, then I'd be scared to leave as well, probably.
Can't see what else it has to kind of add to the story.
No,
beyond setting a time and like just reminding us of our time and place.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Other than that, maybe.
Speaking of which, there's the weird subplot I wanted to ask you about, which is subplot. Gisli, the old man, and they go to bury his wife, and he has not been able to bury his wife.
It's been a while.
He has preserved her in the smokery.
I know.
It was a strange little side story.
What
do you think that was all about?
Well, I was going to ask you the same bloody question. So, which one of us going to answer it?
Okay, well, I'll answer it then.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's about this idea of when, again, that thing of if you're in such a remote place and you've got to eke out a survival, you've got one other person to do it with, and you're kind of, they're your lifeline. You're like kind of reliant on them for life. And a success of a marriage, I guess, is even more kind of significant when you've got to run a farm together, because if it isn't going well, your whole livelihood could come crashing down. And obviously those two have had like a long and happy relationship by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like, then could that be the case for either of our protagonists?
Well, it's certainly the aspiration for Bjarni, isn't it? I would have thought. I think that's probably why we get it.
Yeah.
Is so that Bjarni can see that
one day I want to smoke my wife too.
I mean, it's a really creepy detail. Like, it didn't have to be that creepy to introduce this idea that the thing that he aspires to is possible.
So,
although they didn't seem to have any
moment
children.
In a kind of essentially a romance film.
Yeah, like actually seeing a kind of preserved woman hanging from the ceiling. I don't think I've seen that ever. And I guess it's like quite specifically an Icelandic thing that they do have these smokehouses. They do preserve their meat or their fish. What else are you going to do to stop something rotting? I don't know. We don't know how long it's been that he's not been able to bury her, but
yeah, it was just like a dark moment. I know that the whole I guess it kind of sets the tone as well that this is a romance, but it's not going to be a happy one, basically.
Yeah, there's just moments, just to kind of set you on edge, to make you think like, it's not going to be as happy as we want it to be. Even the happy ones, there's this kind of weird, nasty thing at the end of the line. I think Gisli says, "I've never wanted for anything until now." And what is it he wants now? Now that his wife is gone?
His wife to come back.
Oh, well, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, but she can't because he's preserved her. So it's almost like a foreshadowing, isn't it? That Bjarni, what he wants, because like I said, I don't think they have children. But even without children, they've led a happy life doing what they've wanted to do, running this farm. So it is possible if he truly loved Unna, I suppose. Don't know. It's tricky with love in such a small place, you do just get given the person there, like we said at the start. So tricky, but just a great weird subplot. And was it Sigurður Sigurjónsson from Rams?
Yes.
I thought it was. He's looking older now.
Yeah, he is.
Quite a few years after Rams, I suppose. But it was nice to see him, but a very strange moment in which to find him.
Gísli minn. Þú, veist nú erind okkar. Loks erum við komnir norður til að sækja hana Sigríði og komin í víðan reit. En við vorum nú að spá hvaða ráð þú hefur haft. Í ljósi þess hversu langt liðið frá andlátinu, hvort þú sést nú kannski búin að hóla henni niður.
Já, ég veit ekki hvert ég myndi orða það svo að ég hafi hólað henni niður, en búið að vera mikið frost í urðu. Þannig ég hef reynt að leggja mig fram að búa svona sæmandi hana, Sigríði mína.
After Helga has said to him, you can be whatever you want to be, come to Reykjavik with me, and he's had his meltdown, we see him turn up at her door in Reykjavik 2.5 years later. And he's like, you said I could be whatever I want to be, so here I am. And he's just like...
2.5 years later? You joking me?
I mean, seriously, that is a decision. That's taken a long time.
I mean, think about what you were doing 2.5 years ago. It was like COVID.
I know, like... I'm not the
That's
same
such a
person I
long
was then. My
time
situation
ago.
has changed.
I'd have moved on, forgotten him.
Yeah, the podcast was going then, wasn't it, though?
Oh my God, was it?
Was it?
Mad.
Has it been 2 or 3 years?
I don't know.
Something
Long
like that.
enough.
I know.
But either way,
it's a long time.
It's a long time.
Like, yeah, with anyone, to not have spoken to someone for 2.5 years and then just turn up at their door.
You'd be like, sorry, what?
Yeah. And it almost feels like she could have forgotten who he was. But as we find out, he's been next to her heart the whole time. But yeah, I was just like, yeah, mate, 2.5 years is just, it's too long to make a decision. You've definitely missed the boat.
And then also he seems very surprised when she's like, sorry, where were you 2.5 years ago?
Yeah,
and
when I actually needed you.
And I'm like, yeah, obviously. Did you think you're just going to turn up and then like have her as a mistress with your wife as well? Mm-hmm. And that was just going to be simple? Yeah,
I don't know. His thought processes are confused, muddled. Even when he thinks he's got to the bottom of them, he's not got anywhere near a decision.
Also, she's had to raise that child for 2.5 years. That's his child without his help. That's the terrible twos. Yeah. Imagine having to do that.
Well, and Hulda's just one of 3 kids that she is looking after, like that's a tricky 2.5 years where, he could have been incredibly helpful for many reasons. So that was strange. And I've never really got to the bottom of Bjarni's thought process. It is just a frustrating thing that a man can't make his mind up. Yeah. It's like when you drive in, and as a man, this is what I've learned, when you drive into a car park full of empty spaces, I can't decide which space to take.
It's actually very similar to that.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Just, that's
it's
exactly
just as
like his
life-changing, don't you think?
Oh my God.
So then what? He goes home, back to the farm, and him and Una just kind of live out their days. What? Yeah. Like, not loving each other, but existing in the same space? Yeah,
that is not a household you want to be in, is it? But there'd be loads of like passive-aggressive post-it notes and like silent dinners. Yeah, well, and we see most of that, what you just described. Like, what about that moment where Bjarni confronts Una and she's got these like written like idioms in her pocket? Yeah, that's random. So strange. It's like she's trying to she's putting on a face, isn't she? She's like got all these things telling her to like cheer up. Might never happen.
Yeah, it's like, and he's like, why are you carrying these cliches around? It's like, because she's fucking depressed.
Yeah.
And she's doing her best to like
keep it together.
Yeah, it's that keeping up appearances thing again. But that was a very strange moment. And you just feel like that long time, because when between the door scene and Hulda turning up at the house, there's been, something like 12 years. She's in her teens now. And what have they been doing? Don't know.
I don't like
She's been doing some more needlework. And he's been running the farm, I expect. But what a horrible, boring, shitty life.
Yeah, so depressing and bleak.
Imagine thinking, I want to keep my farm, so I'm going to ruin my life.
To do it.
Just exist. Ugh. But yeah, it does take courage to do these things, which is why we can understand Helga.
But I guess that maybe is like the time that this is set. I guess there was just much more of an idea of you marry someone and that's it, and you make it work, and you might not be the happiest, but you plow on and you get your head down and you get on with it.
Yeah. So Helga's essentially out of time. She's ahead of time. She is the poet, not in inverted commas, she is a poet. She's artsy. She's got the guts and the gumption to leave this land that she doesn't feel comfortable in. And I guess someone had to do it in order to advance even the country as like a place worth visiting. You know, it can't just be farms. Like some people need to do other things. And yeah, she's ahead of the game there in that respect, I suppose. But she reveals in this letter that she's always loved him, and that she only sent him away because she needed to like sever all ties in order to move on with her life. So you got, on one hand, you got Bjarni, like, I think I love her, but I'm just going to exist in this hinterland. Yeah. And on the other hand, you've got Helga going, I do love you, but I can't be with you. I'm not going to wait for you. So I'm going to like cut it, but I'll always be thinking this. And it's just ultimately incredibly frustrating for me. Yeah. Are romance films like that? Don't they normally get together at the end? Yeah,
but this, I guess, doesn't, it's not a rom-com, is it? No. It's not How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's got a different feel to it. I guess it's more like a drama about human connection and love and stuff than a romance film, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It's the intricacies of love more than anything.
Love v duty.
Þú sagðir eins og við mig að ég geti gert það sem mér sýndist. Að ég geti gert það sem ég vildi. Það ert þú sem að ég vil. Þú og Hulda.
Bjarni.
Ég get tekið að mér fleiri störf fyrir sambandið, ég get komið oftar, ég get verið lengi. Ég finn bara eitthvað stráktur að hjálpa Unni með búskapinn. Ég geti gert þetta.
Gert hvað? Þið Unnur?
Hún veit að ég hér.
Ertu farin frá henni?
Helga. Ég þarf að gefa mig tíma. Þetta flókið fyrir mig. Ég bara bóndi. Ég giftur. Ég ekki eins og þú. Ég vildi að ég væri það.
Þú tekur aldrei stökkið.
Ég að taka stökkið.
Ég get ekki elskað ykkur bæði.
Ég komin hingað til að vera með þér.
Bjarni, það liðin 2,5 ár. Ég elskaði þá. Ég þurfti að vera að halda þá.
We're getting right to the end now, but we see old Bjarni. Because like middle-aged Bjarni doesn't really look any different to young Bjarni.
Exactly.
He's got like a bit of red on his face. But old Bjarni, we see Unna has died, and then he's like immediately like, Helga! I know you wanted her dead at one point, but like, come on, man. You should be over it by now.
Oh my God.
Like, you've been waiting for your wife to die, and you're still like, the first thing you do when she dies is like desperately try and remember Helga.
Because there's like, I read Love in the Time of Cholera recently.
Yeah.
And the kind of opening premise of that is that this guy is like loved this, falls in love with her when she's like 13, creepy, but anyway. And then like when she's like 60 or 70 and her husband dies, he's like, remember me from when we were like, I was 16 and you were 13. Maybe we should, I've loved you all this time. Maybe we should start our love affair again. And I'm like, how can you even remember that? Like, get over it. Just move on, man. Move on.
That's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
But I guess, you know, if you're living on a farm, it's not like you're like on Tinder, is it? With like loads of other options available.
No.
Like you're not just...
It's got nothing to distract him.
Yeah, exactly. What else are you going to think about? Nothing else has ever happened apart from doing some lambing. There was like a church service and then a little harvest meal and then some more lambing. Like there's nothing else.
No, and the film does a really good job of like showing that kind of repetition of life. Like at the start they're mowing the grass,
scything,
and then we see that happen again later on, and the landscape as well, like you say, it's obviously reflecting his inner turmoil, her turmoil to some degree, and it all looks so beautiful and also so like devastating. Like it works so well with the inner monologue, but it also does just show you like there's not much here to do, so what can you possibly dwell on? May as well fall in love. May as well think you've fallen in love anyway. So yeah, a beautiful looking film, brilliantly acted, personally slightly frustrating.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the story.
But sometimes love is frustrating, Rob.
It's a complex thing. So yeah, anything else you wanted to say? I think we've covered it pretty extensively there. So. Be keen to hear what other people thought of this, especially from any Icelanders, because this is a really much beloved novel. Obviously, like I said, it comes from a different perspective almost. We actually hear Bjarni's inner thoughts, whereas in this film, we really hear more of Helga through the voiceover and the flashbacks and stuff. Flash forwards, whatever they are. It depends which part of the timeline you're focusing on. So I'd be keen to hear what people thought. And we watched this on the Ruv website. And I think it's a really good resource for people outside of Iceland to watch these films that don't seem to be getting UK releases. These ones that are so specifically Icelandic. Like there's probably loads of stuff in this film that we didn't contextually understand, but feeds into that story and the way they're feeling. But Ruv is such a good portal. Essentially, it's the BBC, isn't it, for Iceland? But they shove up stuff that they've aired for a certain period of time. And I don't think it's on there anymore, but it's worth checking. And I'll put the link again, like we did last week, in the show notes. There we are then, the second of two recent Icelandic films directed by women, and a film genre we haven't seen anything of so far on Kvikmyndapod. What did you think of A Letter from Helga? Were you frustrated by Bjarni like me, or could you really feel for his situation? We'd be very keen to hear from anyone who has knowledge of this period in Icelandic history and can fill us in on any context we might have missed. Let us know on Instagram, Threads or X, or drop us an email at kvikmyndapod@gmail.com. Next week, we're covering a brand new film, and one that's being released in the UK on the day the episode drops. This one also stars Hera Hilmar, and another of our faves, Thruster Leo, and is directed by Hera's dad, stalwart director and former dean of the Icelandic Film School, Hilmar Oddsson. Yep, in case you haven't guessed it yet, Driving Mum is coming out in UK cinemas on the 1st of March. So do all you can to find a screening, and let's show everyone that Icelandic cinema has an audience outside of Iceland. Have fun. Takk og bless. Thanks and goodbye.